If I'm a bitch tonight, would you stop me in the tits? Alright. Anyways, okay. This is probably gonna be short because I don't feel like fucking doing a long clip. So I officially am calling it quits on book 3. I compiled everything. Yeah, I'm happy. Now, there's one issue, and I will get into that later. But right now, the current count is 137 pages, and that doesn't include the table of contents, which is at least 2 pages, plus all the page, all the, skipping down to the next page per chapter. So I kind of came close to my goal of 150 pages. I am currently at 73,562 words, which is pretty fucking sweet. Let me go to the top here. So yeah, the official title is Chocolate Chip Cookies and a Wired Dog, A Kick in the Dick, Life's Little Miracle. That's what I'm naming book 3. A Kick in the Dick and Life's Little Miracle. So yeah, I'm officially fucking done. Like I'm that's it. I'm done. I'm not adding any more to it. It's complete. I did add a couple more chapters. I've been adding chapters left and right to this thing. Okay. Now, to be fair, I think I will read through it one more time, just to kind of get a feel for it. But I will say, the biggest problem that I'm having with it is that part 1 is fine. Although part 1, there might be a couple places in part 1 that's part of the problem too. But part 2, in most of 3, is kind of a clusterfuck. And there's not much I can do about that. Now, when I say clusterfuck, what I mean is, and again, I don't want to run through these fucking titles again, but again, you got the opening story. You got where he tells that he's going to be dating. He goes out and fornicates. Then he leaves us for dead. And then she starts hobnobbing with the house, with the cupboards. They kill Ollie. The house is in complete disarray. Then she gets sick and brings filth into the house. And by this point, Gene's upset with Dale T. Graham's upset with Dale T. Then Dale T gets disowned. And then he asks Gene to leave. Then you've got the candy corn light stories. Then you've got Dale T's letter to Gene, Gene's last day, Gene's handwritten letter to Dale T, and then my reflection on the whole thing. Now that's part 1, and if you notice, there's a progression there. It started out with a normal story. It goes to Dale T, hobnobbing, asking if it's okay. Then he leaves. There's a progression there. Now, part 2 is a little bit different. Where part 2 kind of goes astray, and most of part 3, actually, believe it or not. Because like at this point, Gene has just left. So now part 2 is going to start with the aftermath. And it slowly then starts turning against me. Which was the point. And I did get that. But what happened is I started telling... Again, each chapter was its own individual, unique entity that I kind of hobnobbed together. So I told the same story multiple times, but just different perspectives. Not necessarily perspective, but different... in other words, if you take each individual story, it's a solid story. But if you read 2 or 3 or 4 of these solid stories, you're like, okay, I've heard that before. And I don't know how to fix that without completely revamping quite a bit of shit. Although I shouldn't say quite a bit of shit. We're talking maybe a couple paragraphs. In other words, I kind of do like a recap. And I recap multiple times. And I don't know if that's something we can work on. Because, yeah. Well, let's see. Part 2, we the first story, we make it upstairs to see the, damage that Jean left. Then we have Jean lost her mind. And then the Hobbit starts bringing in... Well, actually, the Hobbit, the Uninviteds. Okay, that story actually then goes back up to... Let's see where it is in part 1. Technically, he did it for the Cupboards and Glory of Mordor's Riches. That story basically goes back to that. The story of the Uninvited goes back to that story in part 1. So in other words, you've got that part where I talked about they moved in, and then I talked about them moving in again, but from like a different perspective. As in, they're the Uninvited, which then sets up for her inviting her family in, and they're the Uninviteds too. So, like, if you put 3 stories together, I don't know if they flow. I shouldn't say they don't flow. They do flow, but again, I said the same thing like 3 different times right there. Essentially, or 2 different times, rather. And I keep hearkening back to different aspects. Like, okay, the house is in shambles, here's another part of the story. Or, he and her just moved in, here's another part of the story. So I keep doing that. And again, I don't know if that works. Yeah, I don't know if that works. But anyways, so let's go through this. So, the committee of 3, no 4, wait, it's 5. That's us getting upstairs. Then Jean, because she had to move and just she went crazy. She literally lost her fucking mind. And actually, that story. See, where's it down here? I think is somewhere. I told that story again down in part 3. So, I don't know. You may have to tweak some of the wordage a little bit. I don't know. That I think is going to be the biggest problem on your end, because I don't know what to do with it. So, as somebody who's coming at this from a different perspective, you're going to have to keep an eye on that. So, in others, okay, so we got Jean moved in, or excuse me, we go upstairs to check out the apartment after Jean left. Jean kind of lost her fucking mind. And then I harken back to the story of the Uninviteds, where I talked about them moving in. They are the Uninviteds. Then we have the War of the Hoses, which actually then that story takes place... Shit, this is in part 2. This story actually goes back... Technically, it probably should be in part 1. See, the problem is I didn't want everything in part 1, so I wanted to move some stuff around. So, this story fits where it is, but I tell another part of while he was still dating her, which actually goes back up to like chapter 3, chapter 4. No, chapter 3 and chapter 4. So it actually would go somewhere in there. But it's geared so it's talking about after the fact. It's like I'm living in the moment of being after the fact. Like, okay, they've moved in, everything's all fucked up. Now let me tell you a story about when he was, I did it differently, and I don't know if it works. That's the thing. I mean, from my end, you have to understand, from my end, it's like, I'm worried about that. As somebody reading it, I don't know how they're going to take it. They may actually like the idea of having the recap, because it's like, oh, I remember when you were talking about that. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Where with me, it was like, it felt like recap, a couple pages, another recap. It felt like that. I don't know, it might, thinking about it from like outside the box, from my own personal understanding, it might actually work. Although it might need to be tweaked a little bit, but, so yeah, we got the Uninvited, and we got the War of the Hoses, Camden White Trash battling it out for supremacy. Then The Uninvited 2, where she starts inviting her family in. The Day the Hobbit Cries Fall, Can't We All Get Along? Deathbed Confessions, The Day I Had Pneumonia and Nobody Cared. Followed by The Day I Realized That My Father Loves a Homeless Guy More Than Me. So, what happened is in part 2, we got to a certain point where Jean had moved, and then everything after that became kind of a clusterfuck. And I kind of wrote a little bit about that, and I actually apologized to like the reader. I was like, I'm sorry if this is kind of bouncing all over the place, but it was such a chaotic event that I'm just trying to get everything out, and I basically want you, the reader, to kind of experience like just how fucking crazy it all was. So I don't know if that covers it. Again, you'll have to determine that as you go through, and I cannot get comfortable in this fucking bed. What the hell? Anyways, but yeah, the overall narrative, like the umbrella story, like going from point. See, this is how it is. It goes in part 1. It goes A B C D E F G, and then we get to part 2, and then it's like G G G H I J G G H I. Yeah, that's how it feels. Like I'm kind of backpedaling while telling a bigger story, not necessarily a cohesive story, but just a bigger story. That's what it feels like to me. So in other words, like, well, there was only really couple handful of moments where, okay, Gina's moved out, everything's good, we're all on the same page, and then things slowly start to happen. She said I could ride the fucking lawnmower, and I told her to kiss my ass as a joke. She didn't take it as a joke. Then, she started looking through my stuff. She started going through my room. There was all these little moments, and then she, they fucking turned on me, and then they kicked me out. That's how it's supposed to go. But I kind of intermingle it instead of just doing, A, B, C, D. I went and kind of did. Again, I don't know. I just. I don't know. I'm gonna have to, like I said, I'll have to read through this again. And it's only just like a couple paragraphs. That's the thing. Well, actually, I know for a fact I said the exact same wording twice. Where I talked about pissing in her shoes. About how I basically say, yeah, like I really got up out of bed, went out to the porch, pulled down my pants, and exposed myself to God and nature and pissed in her shoes. And I said that exact quote because that was kind of my thing, and I said it twice in 2 different stories. But one was like in part 2, and the other was in part 3. So I said exactly the same thing twice. But again, if you're reading that one story, it makes sense. If you're reading the other story, it makes sense. But if you're reading them both back to back, it might be overkill. So again, that's where I'm coming at. Yeah, she moved the homeless guy in. Then she got married. Let's see. Then we got just some random stories there. The JCPenney jewelry shit, which I actually like that one. Hobbit Love Lies and Dirty Deeds. That's actually not a bad story. I read through that. It's not a bad story. I kind of like that one. Then we go into part 3. We got Dale T's Little Fucking Inferno, which is also, that one's kind of interesting too. It kind of comes across being a little presumptuous, like kind of like arrogant. Like I start breaking down Dante's Inferno, and I start like analyzing it, and then explaining how the situations in that poem correlate to my current situation with Dale T and the Hobbit. And it comes across as being a little showy, a little wordy, like, the existentialism of the whatever. I don't know. I know I acted like I knew what the fuck I was talking about, which I really don't. But no, actually, that's not true. I actually kind of did know most of that stuff, so I took it for what it was. Whatever. And some of it I obviously was playing up, so whatever. Then we got a little oink fucker of a man. Oh, then right around here is when the story starts to pick up again and starts going back, you know, Hijkl, so on and so forth. Where Grandma's upset with the whole situation. Jean's already moved out. Then we got Cousin Renee getting involved. We got my terms of departure. Jean's little fuck party. That's when they cut off the internet from me. I did add the story, The Hobbit is paranoid and losing her damn mind, the day the bitch violated me, so to speak. Or violated my trust, so to speak. That's where she ransacked my room. Oh, and I did this one part I thought you'd enjoy. It's called This is a new chapter. It's called Live Performance Art Pieces Done by a Bastard. Let me say that again. Live performance art pieces done by a bastard. And it's just different stuff that I did as I kind of jagged on my way out. Like cutting the cord of the computer, the insides, pissing in a shoe, but allegedly, stuff like that. So I kind of played it up as like art, like performance art, which it was technically. Then we got this other one that I just did. A Desperate Plea to My Lawyer, The Hobbit Wants It All. Yeah, I was surprised when I found that. Where she wanted me to get a fucking, she wanted me out of the house, but then wanted me to get a will and leave everything to my father. And I'm like, fuck you, bitch. Scumbag. And then the rest of it, basically moving forward, is me packing up my shit and then moving out, essentially. So, pretty much everything from the Uninviteds, the setup story, all the way down to technically all the way down to shit, I don't even know. Because again, some of the stories, it's weird because the stories fit together, I think. The way this reads, all the stories in order fit in a certain way so that they're acceptable reading of them. But some of the stories are past, present, future, current, whatever. There's no rhyme or reason for why they go together, but they do kind of go together. Like, for example, Jean's little 4th of July fuck party in September. That fits perfectly in terms of departure. Then we have the Hobbit is paranoid and losing her damn mind. The day the bitch violated my trust, so to speak. They go together, like chronological, but they also just kind of go together as you're reading them. Well, actually, technically, those three did go chronological. And the performance pieces, that is me talking about being on my way out, but I never even started talking about. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's definitely a problem that I'm not gonna make for book 4. I can tell you right now. Because the stuff that I was doing currently, I really liked how I was doing it because it literally went A, B, C. Each chapter was A, B, C. And it's like one led right into the next, boom, boom, boom. But it was the other stories that I had done when it happened that I was trying to shoehorn in because obviously that's why I wrote them. It's like this shit just, I don't know, I don't want to say it didn't fit, but it didn't fit with the flow that I had achieved. So it's like there's really good flow, kind of a like, what the fuck is this? But it works, don't get me wrong, but it's like, I can't describe how, I don't say how good, but I don't know, it's like there are certain parts that just, like, each one goes together, like, really well. And there's little sections with like 3 or 4 chapters that just fit together really nicely, and then there's like a questionable one where it's like, oh, let me tell you about this story and blah 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 blah, and it kind of goes off. But the story's relevant, so it's not like it's, Yeah, nothing here is irrelevant except for, I think, like one section, and that's the collection of heartwarming, pointless stories simply to fill space. And the first one is leaving my shit behind when I die. And then the third one is green licorice shits. Those two stories, and really small, really had nothing to do with anything. I just threw them in there because they were there. But the one about JCPenney jewelry, obviously that's topical and it fits. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just. But again, I want to read through this. Maybe I could tweak some of this stuff. I don't know. But it's like I don't want to tweak anything because I mean, okay, let's say I talk about something in chapter 15, but then I talk about it the first time in chapter 1. Well, it makes sense in chapter 1 and it makes sense in chapter 15. But again, if you're taking it as a cohesive story, it's double play. And it's like I don't know how to fix that. Because there's really not a way to fix it. I could tone it down. I could maybe cut some stuff, but I don't want to cut stuff because again, for the individual story, it's like sometimes when I'm doing a clip, I'll say, I've talked about this before, but for the sake of this clip, let me reiterate it. That's kind of what it is. That's kind of actually I did that quite a bit. So, and like I said, sometimes it's almost word for word. No, actually, there's only one place that I did word for word, and that was the section I mentioned earlier about exposing myself to God and nature. The rest of the stuff, it's not word for word, but it's the same story. I mean, again, for like a paragraph or two, it's a setup for what's coming next in that particular story. So in other words, think of it as like branching paths. Like you get to that one like focal point, that apex in that moment in history, and it branches off into like 5 different stories. That's kind of what I was doing, not purposely, but that's kind of what happened. And again, I don't know how that plays out. So right now, that's really the only thing you'd have to worry about as you're editing it. I can't really think of anything specific that would be problematic. I hope it works. I hope that it plays out, and I hope it's something that it doesn't need like a serious re-edit. I don't think it does. That's the thing. Now, it might come down to it's going to be too much work to try to fix it, so just leave it. It might come down to that, or it might come down to, well, this is actually brilliant because it just is. It just turned out to be brilliant. It's something you weren't sure of, but it's really fucking brilliant, and because in a way, as I was reading it, it kind of kept me invested. It's like, yeah, I'm hearing the same thing again, but oh, here's some more information to it. So it's like, yeah, I'm remembering back to when the last chapter was talking about that. Well, again, here's more information about that. So it kind of kept me, as the reader, engaged in the sense of I'm familiar with this story. So I don't know. I don't know how that. I don't know how it plays out. Because I know how it plays out for me, and it feels weird as the writer, but because it's like you have to separate yourself from the writer, then you read it again. You're like, how does this feel as just reading it? But the problem is, I know the story, so it's like I might be making a big deal out of it, or it might actually be a big deal. That I don't know. Anything else? One last thing, because oh my god, I'm pretty much happy with it, with the exception of what I've been talking about. I love the Hobbit theme. I think that's absolutely brilliant. A couple things happened during this that I wasn't really anticipating, but it is what it is. Like I had to move a couple chapters around, which I mentioned in previous clips, but I'm mostly happy with my titles. I mean, again, there's a few that could be tweaked here or there. Um, Dissension in the Rank and More Bullshit in the Making. I think that's good. Committee of Three, No Four, Wait is Five. I think that's a great title, actually. I think it's a funny, witty title. So yeah, I don't. Again, there was a couple. The run-on chapters, the run-on title chapters, just meant to be silly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how funny this is. It's funny to me and it's funny to you, but I don't know how funny it would be to other people who weren't in the know. So I definitely want to get some feedback. Yeah, I don't know how that'll work. I'm fucking tired, I'll tell you that much. Let's see, is there any other thoughts that I have before I give this to you? Again, it started off with a simple chapter, kind of reflecting back to book 2, just DLT and I going out to dinner, and it ends with an epilogue of Graham and the Big Whaler, which is just a setup for her and I living together, essentially. Not that I was living with her, but she was now in my, you know, sphere of influence. So yeah, actually I think that's a great epilogue, to be honest with you. I'm not saying the story is all that great, but I think the concept of just telling a random story of Graham and I going out to the Burger King, especially when there's a couple moments in there where she like grabs other people's food and starts looking in, and she's like, "Peter, this isn't ours." I'm like, "I know shit, Graham. I know it's not. It's that person. Stop touching their food." She's like, "Oh," and she, stupid shit like that. And then we leave, and she goes to back up, and she doesn't look at the cars behind her, and she's just backing up, and I'm like yelling, "Graham!" I'm like, "Graham, what the fuck? What the fuck, Graham? There's cars behind us." And he's like, "Oh." Just old lady backing the fuck up. Yeah, I didn't talk about Graham as much as I thought I would in this one. There's a couple spots. No, obviously Graham and the Big Whaler. There's Graham Dolph. That story where I show up at her house, like at the apartment, and I show up downstairs to talk to her when I first arrive. There was that other story. Grandma's upset and she ain't having it no more. And she was intermingled throughout as far as like hunkering down with Gene and shit. Oh, and I tell a story about when she came to the house. That's right. I just read through that. Yeah, that was kind of a fun story. It was fun for me. It wasn't. I don't know if it's fun for a reader, but it was just kind of fun for me because it's just Graham's last visit to the house, and it was just kind of made me think back to when it took place. Crazy shit though. That much. Holy crap. Anyways, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else? Yeah. Again, the biggest thing is I repeated myself numerous fucking times. But again, that might actually turn out to be genius too. I honestly don't know. I seriously don't know. I mean, again, it might have turned out to be absolutely genius. Because to me, there's 2 points to that. Like I said, as I was reading through, it took me back to those moments. Like, okay, this is back before DLT met her, or this is when he just met her, or this is when he moved out and was living with her. So it's like it tells this complete story, but in such a way that it's not exactly in order. So again, I don't know if it's the most genius thing I've ever done or the most incoherent thing I've ever done. Oh, dude, seriously, that's the best way to put it. It's either genius or incoherent. Maybe it's incoherent and it's genius. I don't know. I mean, I guess there could be a third option. Um, yeah, I don't think it's something that really needs to be redone, like completely, like ground level rework. But I may have done it a little excessive. I definitely did it excessive. There's a couple times when I went back and just did it excessive. You may want to tone it down, or you might read it and be like, "Yeah, this is fine the way it is." So that I'm absolutely curious about. That is one thing I'm absolutely curious about when you go to fucking edit this. Uh, Goddamn battery. Fuck you, battery. I was just at 100 goddamn percent. Fucking bullshit. Now I'm down to 5. Um, yeah. Um, I like this story. I like this book. Well, actually, I don't like this book because I don't like where it made or it took me like as a person. I don't like it. I don't like dredging up those hateful feelings. I had put a lot of that stuff back. I had repressed a lot of that shit, the hatred, the anger. Um, but I think it's a fun story. I mean, I think it's good, especially when you put it in comparison with like, or not in comparison, but you put it in conjunction with 1 and 2, and then 4. Because 4 is basically part 2 of this. So you got the first part and then the second part, and that's why I didn't want to combine them because I think they deserve to have their own space to breathe. Where this, and like I said before in another clip, and here I'm doing it again. Um, this book 3, I don't know. This book 3 I wrote differently than the other two. Now the problem that I've been discussing here is not how I intentionally wrote it. It just was kind of a byproduct of the process that was outside of my, you know, knowledge until I went back and reread it. Because I was reading it and doing editing too, so I was kind of doing that. Because I think next time what I'm going to do is just read through it and then see how it plays out. So again, I could be making a, you know, a problem out of nothing. But I wanted book 3 to be feel completely different. I think it does, because again, this goes A, B, C, D. It goes right like in order. But then part 2 and then most of part 3, it doesn't do that. It goes back and tells more stories intermingled. And I may have put, I think that could have worked, but I think I did it too much in one section, and then it carries over into the third section, which kind of, I don't know, because I mean, if you're going to put it in chronological order, then you'd have to see. Now that's a problem. If we did chronological order, we'd then have to move the chapters around and then rework the entire structure of said chapter, because most of the stuff, like I said, was written in a past tense as opposed to a present tense. Because I tried to do the beginning in present tense, and then right around Jean moving, then it kind of became past tense, where it's like, you know,